Welcome to the AESQ Subject Matter Interest Group webinar on examples and insights and training from human factors. This is for AS13100. Now, it's one of the biggest kind of questions, feedback topics that we've seen over the last few supplier forums, with people looking for more information and more guidance on human factors, specifically around training. So from that feedback and those requests, we pulled together today's webinar. Very quick introduction from myself, and then we'll go through a bit of the agenda and introduce the rest of the team. My name's Chris Craig. I work as Senior Operations Quality Manager in Rolls-Royce, and I have been working on human factors for a number of years now, looking to deploy this into our business and our organization. And I've been a member of the Subject Matter Interest Group for the last 2 to 3 years. Today's webinar, after I give a bit of an introduction, I'll hand over to some fantastic presenters. First off, we'll have Håkan Björkalv from GKN, who will share some of their training content, how they've structured the training, some examples from there. This is one element that when we were pulling this together, I found really useful, had a few penny drop moments, very valuable, I found. We'll then hand over to Dan Carroll from PCC and Bethany Ryan from GE, and they'll share a few examples of how to make training delivery engaging and interactive. And some of these examples are from various members of the Subject Matter Interest Group. And then finally, we'll hand over to Nicole Carlin from Collins Aerospace, who will share some of the kind of training top tips for setting up a program and developing training. And this is potentially useful inside defined for either those of us that develop our own training or those that go out and source training as well. So the idea is that there'll be content in here for everyone. And we'll wrap up today with a question and answer session. If I can ask everyone to use the chat for any questions, we've got Bethany monitoring the chat through the session. So thank you, Bethany. Just a little bit on the Subject Matter Interest Group. So our goal is really to assist the development of knowledge and understanding through the application and use of human factors in line with AS13100. And that's all with the goal to, achieve zero defects in our industry. The kind of prime responsibility within there is the maintenance and upkeep of the reference manual. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. As you can see, we've got quite a few members here from kind of prime engine organizations as well as some from the kind of more supplier-based manufacturing organizations. There's been a lot of change over the last year, where we've had quite a few of the founding members actually retire, unfortunately, but we're starting to pull together a really good, strong group of people. And we have a fantastic program of work start to get planned out for 2024, where really what we want to do is get more examples out there, more insights out there in a shorter form than potentially webinars, but just get that material out there so the rest of the industry can use that from the kind of generated and group experience. As I mentioned, prime responsibilities around RM 13010 on human factors. This had a significant update last year around April time, and this was to get in as many examples as we could from the kind of participating subject matter interest group companies. Oh no, I think I may have just dropped out there for a second, so apologies. Awesome. There are other ways for everyone to get involved and everyone to interact with the subject matter interest group. I believe if you join the AESQ as an affiliate member, you can have your employees, your team members join the subject matter interest group and play an active role within there. You can also visit the AESQ website, where the reference manual can be downloaded, as well as other elements that should be helpful. And we also have a LinkedIn community of practice that is, let's say, for the moment, it's not as well used as it could be, but it is a prime place to ask questions and get a relatively quick response. I think one of the goals for 24 is to actually make better use of that as far as we can. And the other area that we can ask questions is through emailing, as you can see on the bottom of the page here, the AESQ email address, and that will get directed to either myself or some of the other leads from some of the other subject matter interest groups, depending on what you want to know. So how I usually like to start things like training courses, webinars, is I like a bit of a quiz. So 3 multiple choice questions are coming up. I will ask if you can use the chat to answer, and we'll see how everyone does. So first question, how many civil aviation flights do you think there were in 2023? A, B, C, or D? Please put your answer in the chat. Well, that's fantastic. There's I can see
across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can see a lot of C's and a lot of D's there. So if you answered C, based off the information I've managed to get, then you're correct. Well done. It's around 34.4 million. That is an estimated value at the beginning of this year, that it's going to be close to 34.4 million. Some of the other answers in there, 38.9 million was 2019, just before the pandemic hit. And then you can see A, B, and C coming as there is the recovery from the pandemic within that. So, second question for you. What was the safest year in aviation history? Was it A, B, C, D, or E? Answers in the chat.
Seeing a lot of C's, the variety across the board.
Yeah, there's a lot of C's in there. I think I noticed a few A's as well. Not many E's. I did notice a few, but yeah. So I've been running this question in quizzes for probably the last 3-4 years now, and up until this year, the answer was A, 2017. Doing my due diligence, I checked again before I ran this, and there are reports coming out that 2023 has actually been a lot safer. So there were only two fatal accidents within 2023, whereas 2017 there was around 16. So well done if you got that right. Last question, answers in the chat. On average, how many errors per hour do humans make? So A, B, C, or D? Looks like a range of answers in there. But I have not spotted a trend. But for those of you that said B, 3 to 5, well done. So on average, 3 to 5 per hour adds up to roughly about 50 per day. Now, okay, seeing as we all and a lot of people we know spend a significant proportion of our time in a very safety critical industry, you can imagine what proportion of those errors happen as we're spending time there, and why things like human factors is really crucial for not only product safety, but for people safety and ultimately defect reduction as well. So I like running these things because hopefully everyone learns something and everyone can then impart that little factoid to someone else. So thank you very much. I will now hand over to Håkan, who will share some of the kind of GKN's insights on training content. So thank you very much, Håkan. Håkan, we seem to have lost your audio.
So maybe works now.
We're good to go.
Yep. Okay, Håkan Björkälv, working at GKN Aerospace Engines in Sweden, the southern part of Sweden. Working with integrated logistic support, technical manuals, customer training on jet engines, both in-house and to customers, and fleet monitoring and field service representatives. That's in my group. But my human factor interests started 25 years ago, maybe, and when had a course on the university in Trollhättan here in human factors. That this is really interesting. Let's have it at GKN. But the time wasn't right. But the years after, the F145 requirements will come there, so I had to do some courses, and I have continued with the university and also yearly contact with Human Factors Network in Sweden. So how do we do courses at GKN in Trollhättan? I like to have every group is a special group because we have different participants from different places with their own experience. So I have a quite small group with 50 persons maybe, and then I have to twist topics to reflect the participants' daily work as an operator or a manufacturing engineer or the quality person and so on. That is interesting to have those courses then. And we promote an open and honest discussion. So I often tell my errors. I do errors every day. It starts in the morning when driving to GKN. I have a little bit higher speed than allowed, actually. And that's an error. Nothing happens. I come to work 1 minute earlier. Still an error. And reflect on the topics we have, how it affect my daily decisions in work and share it in group. The lessons structure then, I have it in 3 parts. Facts, research, what's the story behind the facts I have, human error models, how our brain works, our vision works, or memory and so on. It's good to have facts behind that. And one part is exercises, experiences from disasters and so on, and also from films. And then we have to find out, is this applicable to me and my work? Can this happen to me? The errors that are in those exercises, for example. And by testing and reflecting, obviously, and act and react in situations and decisions, we can learn from it. And the third part is, how does this affect me in my work tomorrow, for example, when I do my ordinary work, and in discussions to share with others and so on. And that means I'm the facilitator in the group, not in the instructor or trainer. I facilitate the discussions in the group, actually. Okay. So here, what's to cover in the course? A lot of topics, 10 different topics with a lot of subtopics. So it's difficult to choose from. So I will share how I made my exercises and what topics and subtopics I cover then. So we continue with the next one. For example, video scoping and engine. I have done video scoping courses for 20 years, and I have a lesson about human factors in video scoping and engine. I see in the blade in the engine and the damages and so on. There's a chain from the component inside the engine to the communication with the experts. And I also tell them that you don't see the blade inside the engine, you see a picture of the blade. So the component in the engine with the video scope, you take the probe inside and there how near or far you are away from the blade, shadows, reflections, the light source, and up to the video screen or this video scope. And it can differ from video scope to video scope. And then the chain goes into the eye, the only part we calibrate actually, with a yearly calibration of the IO. How much do you see actually? And it differs from person to persons. And you take help with glasses, contact lenses, and so on. And you see with your brain, it continues into the brain and there, building up the picture actually. So how do the brain build up the picture? So we use brain teasers and different pictures on squares with the same grayscale with different background. It differs when you see it together, but if you take the background away, it's the same. And after that, you communicate with the technicians, and they will communicate with the experts. So you have a long chain that affects your decision, actually. So do we see the same thing? And it's been a very valuable introduction to that course. I also used it in visual examination on other parts of this chain also. And with that course, we covered, as you can see, a lot of topics in this 10 topics with the subtopics. Interesting discussions and with a lot of brain teasers. Okay, another exercise to use. Here with the engineering department, with the design department, have this reviewing others' reports, documents, drawings, instructions, and so on. And I think you're familiar with that, that if we review others' papers a lot. So what affected me in my effort in reviewing others' reports? Do I know what I shall review? What role do I have when reviewing? What glasses should I use? And does it affect me when I know the other persons and like or dislike the other person? Does that affect my reviewing? Often interesting discussions then. And the next part is how do you read a text? And then we come into memory, knowledge, stress, and so on. When you're reviewing a text, I should sign that you have reviewed it. What's the questions from others? Have you signed your part? Or is it, have you reviewed it? So with the memory, how does the memory work? And the reading, when we start learning to read, you read letter by letter and then word by word, and 3 or 4 words together. You get a picture of the word and so on. And if a single letter or single word exchange, do we see that? And and okay, I was interrupted here. I found this heuristic evaluation reviewing others' work. If you're a single person review others my instructions, they will only find 30% of the errors. 2 persons will find 40% and so on, but you can't reach 100%, especially if they are same persons that you have the same experience and so on. And then we have discussions about reviewing, and we also have this letter to myself we write during the course. 3 topics. What type of documentation do I review? What role do I have? How shall I review this? What glasses shall I have? And the third part, what shall I do better tomorrow when I review reports? And then you can pick it up the next day and prepare yourself. And with this lesson, we cover a lot of topics with awareness, behavior, information, information processing, memory, situational awareness, stressors, for example, time pressure and deadlines, and also cultural differences and so on. But I think that's a good exercise. Okay, next one. We had for our managers last year dilemmas. Working with a tower like this and build it up and have these dilemmas often daily situations you can be in, and the discussions will mostly for 1 minute. What should you do in this situation? I tell the groups that you have 30 minutes to build this tower. At least 14 dilemmas will be done. So we do this, and after 10 minutes, I shorten the time. Okay, we will have 5 minutes less, so we only have 25 minutes. Put some stress in it. You see, I have these different colors. You can also choose to have dilemmas in, for example, people, values, and culture for 1 color, processes and procedures in another color, and equipment design in the 3rd colors. And you can roll it as a dice and pick dilemmas after what you find out. The interesting is to see if what happens if the tower fall. Do the other look for who did it, or do they ask what happened, who to blame, or what happened? So it's really interesting discussions during this exercise. I talked to the managers here, so they said it was very valuable exercise talking about these daily dilemmas they have. Okay, the last one. Oh, here we have examples of dilemmas. So what happens if you have a job, work that someone else have done earlier and not signed off? You have a time pressure. What shall you do then? In a daily basis, I think you all recognize the situation. Or, for example, for a manager, you have two co-workers that are enemies. They can't stand each other, and they work the same shift and are expected to work together from time to time. How will you manage that that situation and other dilemmas? Okay, here's another one. You can do this exercise in different ways. I have done it with groups, with 4 persons, have a build up with Duplo like this. You recognize it. And an easy second, sorry. And I often put it in a box with 4 windows. And the first person go to check the first window, go back to the group, and I will start to build. And the second person go to the box and see another window and go back. And the group shall copy this construction in their own place. And you can only communicate in the building place. Now we have this with shift task handover, culture differences, vision, memory, stress. You see the other ones building these constructions. You can also use this. If I give the group model of this, they shall write an instruction for another group, and they will build up the same construction actually. So it's about reading instructions, task handover, and also writing instructions. We cover a lot of things in this exercise, and you can change it depends on the situation and the participants. So some of the exercises I use actually. So with that, I will hand over to Ben and Bethany.
All right, thank you, Hakan. So, hello everyone, my name is Dan Carroll. I work for Precision Cast Parts Corporation, PCC, and very long title there, but my job revolves around product safety, the safety of our products that we deliver to our customers, and ultimately the flying public. So, Bethany, you want to give a quick intro for yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Bethany Ryan. I am a human factors engineer with GE Aerospace. I've had that job title for a couple years, and prior to that, I worked in shop safety and then shop quality roles where I was learning about human factors and applying it in those spaces. And that is what brought me to the job I have now.
All right. Thanks, Bethany. So in this section, we're going to go over some examples for delivering training, human factors training. I'm going to focus on videos, exercises, group discussion, and then the one that's most powerful for me, that's worked for me, is storytelling. So here, as we go through, here are some video examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. Again, I saw some in the chat. The reference manual, 13,010, Appendix A, which starts on page 25 of that manual, has many other examples of videos, articles, books, podcasts, to go, a wealth of other resources there. 2 that I want to touch on here that I have used that have been successful, the top 2. Crossed Wires case study gets into a repair and maintenance facility, smaller shop, getting an aircraft ready, going through the struggles of time, pressure, new employees, seasoned employees, customers breathing down your neck for wanting their plane back as quickly as possible. And that's really the stuff that goes wrong. Then to follow that up as you're going through with the training session, the second video, the right connections, is the reverse of the first video and kind of goes through how these situations should be approached, how can they be handled to get the most desirable outcomes. But on the next slide, we're going to actually show you, these videos range in time, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, but here's one, just the history of human factors.
To err is human. For this reason, we've made mistakes as we conquered frontiers. And with skies beckoning, we tried and tried to fly, but physics wasn't on our side. Then with a little bit of hot air, we finally beat gravity and powered right into the wild blue yonder. And it wasn't long before we slipped into the First World War. Amazingly, more people were killed by poor decisions and sloppy training than machine guns and dogfights. But with lessons learned, we blitzed our way through into the Second World War. And aviation began to streamline. More power, more dials, more speed, but sadly, a lot more stress. So we introduced science, and the first rudimentary simulators started to trick reality. Then finally, the dust settled, and bombs were replaced by bums. And we soared passengers into the jet age. Pilots went from heroic risk-takers to wearing gold bars and wrangling with computers. And the airlines grew and grew. But so did the human factors, and they came thick and fast. And after several tragedies in the 70s, safety refocused on communication and teamwork. And in the 90s, we really started to look at the whole picture, not just at work and second jobs, but at home and in play. So now we recognize that human error can occur anywhere, anytime, in any system. So as we build our knowledge of human behavior, we'll continue to boldly go where we've never been before.
All right, so just a little flavor there of a example video that the companies have used to just kind of explain where we're going with human factors. Always good to get into the history. It's not something new, right? That touched in there, been around since the 70s with that, but we're kind of getting more and more into it in our industry now. So some examples of some exercises: human factors bingo, going through scenarios, using the dirty dozen. Are people, is there a lack of teamwork, fatigue, distractions with that, and bringing that in. Product safety and just culture quiz, as Chris was showing an example earlier when we started off, thinking of some questions just to get everything flowing a little bit. Does your organization have a just culture? What is a just culture? Free from ridicule, going back on someone who's bringing something up, having those difficult discussions. Dilemma scenarios, Hakan touched on that, but we all know in our plants, we come to decision trees. What should we do next? What are the pressures, the circumstances that go through in making our decisions? Running exercises on and categorizing behaviors. People found effective starting with something outside of work, speeding. What are the reasons for going in that, and then relating that into the work that is done every day. And of course, sharing real world examples, first person stories. The power of those gets other people to start sharing. So when I'm leading, facilitating, telling a story that has been personal to me, usually I'm not the only person that has happened to, and then that starts bringing out other discussions. So when you're got groups together, and again, usually 15, 20 people work the best with this. What can we do every day that affects the safety of our products? Following procedures, doing it the right way every day. right? And then what in your organization, having these open discussions, positive and negative cultural forces, what needs to change, what is positive? Celebrate the good. I think a lot of times we focus on the negatives, and there are things to go through with that. But when you have a win, celebrate the win, promote the win, talk about the win. And then getting through and talking, what are the threats to the organization? I find the most when I'm out talking to the operators, the folks on the floor, bringing their ideas in. They're the one who are touching the parts every day to go through. Incorporate those people with managers and supervisors and going through the training. And then how have leaders, general managers, presidents, affect fair and just culture? We've talked examples, people before, they don't want to share. They have had issues in the past. It's like, well, hey, even though those leaders aren't there anymore, we're changing things over. Why is that the case? Bringing those things out. And then at the end, summarizing, okay, what are we going to do as a group, as a team to take this out into the operations? And then again, even taking that group of 15, 20, break that down into smaller groups of 3 or 4 to share stories, get involvement, and again, making it personal. So with all that talk, on the next slide, please, Chris. I'm going to share a story right now that is very personal to me. That let's say it involves, pretend I'm the person talking on the cell phone, walking through the plant, and then we'll call my friend on the fork truck. I won't say his last name, but his real first name was John. And this was about 10 years ago for me. I'm walking through the plant, new operation for me, first month there, going through out on the floor, looking for an issue, fixing a problem. And my general manager's calling me, finally answer the phone, walking through an intersection in our plant, not paying attention, distracted on where I'm going. And John there, driving a fork truck, if he didn't stop, he would have hit me. I was not paying attention. I was distracted. So things that I use that story to go through and talk about what happened to me initially, but that kind of then goes and brings out, well, what happened of that? At that plant now, we got walkways, intersections. I personally share that story. After that one incident and almost getting hit, I never answer calls on the floor. I go into an office, talk about that. So I'm not distracted. I'm paying attention to what's going on. But then that brings out different scenarios of, oh yeah, this, when I'm going through and working on this part and I got people coming up to me and it's an open area. Okay, well, how do we get those distractions out? Do we close off that area so they're not being distracted? Taking those parts out of that scenario. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Bethany to give some further examples.
So we encourage including stories in human factors training because storytelling is such an impactful way to illustrate the power of applying human factors principles within the organizations that we all work in. So I'll also share a story now that does this, but as you're developing the training within your organizations, if you have your own story or one that resonates well with your group, go ahead and replace it with this one or use this one if it resonates well. But really, the more that we can tell our own stories, the more meaningful that they can be. So this is a true story from an aerospace component manufacturer, although all the names have been changed to protect the innocent. Once upon a time, there was a site called the Site That Shall Not Be Named. And at this site that shall not be named, there were several grinding machines and various production parts that used one of 2 main coolant types throughout the shop. One morning, a supervisor, Ethan, was abruptly approached by a product engineer. And she said, "Ethan, Billy used the wrong coolant running my parts last night." This site was delinquent on pretty much everything, and Ethan knew this was bad news. All of the hot parts that Billy ran would need to be non-conformed and now required the lab to perform cut-up analysis in order for them to be released. So the chance to ship any of these parts this week was none to low, and he was already behind on his commits. So we should note that the site that shall not be named had a strict disciplinary policy for not following work instructions. And at this site, this was regarded by all as a good policy. The parts they made went in aircraft engines, and hundreds of thousands of people's lives depend on these engines at any one moment. So it seemed like a logical policy to have. Ethan headed down to the shop floor. Billy worked third shift and consistently stayed over on overtime for days, or on overtime during day shift. But today, he bolted to his car immediately at shift change. A copy of the work instruction was open on the shop floor computer, and sure enough, a drum of the coolant type that was not the one called for in the work instructions was sitting there right next to the grinder. Ethan considered himself a good supervisor. He was firm, fair, and consistent. He took the rules seriously, and so did his employees. The rules were designed to keep the manufacturing processes stable, and therefore aircraft engines flying. Ethan stood by them and intended to follow through with the discipline system set up by HR. However, Ethan had recently participated in human factors training. Because Billy had already left the shop for the day, Ethan had a little extra time to consider his response. A takeaway message from the human factors training kept echoing in his mind. Punishing someone for human error will never help you improve at a site. Ethan arrived early the next morning to talk to Billy about his work. The first thing Billy said was, "I messed up. I know. I should have paid more attention. I promise not to mix up the coolants ever again." While Ethan agreed that Billy had made a mistake, he also believed that Billy didn't mean to do so in the first place. So Ethan probed a little further and asked Billy, "What is changing the coolant typically like?" Billy explained that maintenance did a very good job keeping the coolants available around the shop. The two coolants used came in identical 55-gallon pink barrels, and to tell them apart, he needed to check the alphanumeric code that was printed on a sticker on the top of the lid. And there was either a 300 or a 400 embedded somewhere within that code. Ethan recognized that the coolants could be better differentiated. So he actually called the coolant vendor and explained the difficulty that his shop faced sometimes with this. And the coolant company not only agreed that the coolants could be difficult to readily tell apart for their customers, but also saw that this was a problem in their own internal operations. And so they changed one of them to come in a blue drum. So color coding, it's pretty great. And this isn't even the end of the story. A while later, Ethan circled back and asked Billy how the solution was going. Billy said that he didn't think that the color coding would hurt anything. And he continued and said, "But from a machining standpoint, I really don't know. Some parts use the 300 coolant and some use the 400 one, and some are okay to use either one. And I can't find a correlation between the metal type or the machine type, but I do drain and refill the grinders to whatever the instructions call for." Ethan thought back to the many times he had shut down areas to call in vendors for cleanup when folks had left the tanks refilling, sometimes with a rubber band around the hose while they walked away to do something else. Sometimes it took even up to a half an hour to refill these tanks. And so standing there for that long, sometimes difficult for people to do. But this conversation made him wonder if there was even a true reason to have to switch between the two coolants. So Ethan connected with the quality engineers in the area and learned that the coolant type on the instructions was likely just based on whatever was in the machine when the first article was done, and not necessarily that the other would have a detrimental effect on the hardware. So rather than the quick fix of writing Billy up, Ethan got to learn a lot about this process. And so in coordination with the lab and quality and production, Billy and Ethan began the process of having the parts certified on both coolants, and this would reduce the need to empty and refill and all that non-productive time around that, to start having the shop move toward just having a single coolant. Go to the next slide. So here we see populating on the screen something called a blame cycle. And what it showcases is that if we blame for human error, we kind of enter this downward spiral toward worse and worse performance. So looking at this blame cycle, let's imagine if that supervisor, Ethan, had handled the coolant situation differently. So starting at the top with some human error is Billy used the wrong coolant. And if the very next step after that was Ethan would discipline and maybe it felt like talking down to kind of have this interaction with Billy, that was the very first step that would lead to a little bit of reduced trust in that relationship, and then certainly less communication. Billy maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to explain how the drums came in identical drums. Maybe it'd be a little difficult to look at the codes. Management is less aware of the job site conditions. So certainly the effort that Billy went through to try to understand the correlation between the different parts and the different coolants likely wouldn't have occurred, and certainly not had that discussion between himself and the supervisor. So that means all of those conditions that Ethan learned about would have just stayed in the system. So then those errors would be likely, as new parts come in and they're just certified on one coolant versus another, the opportunity for human error just continues to compound. So really a takeaway from all of this, we want to click, is that we want to be hard on our processes, not on our people. If we equip more and more of our teams with human factor skills, then we're likely to resolve the contributing factors that are leading to that human error and minimize the chance of them repeating. There tends to be a pretty big difference in solution sets that are discovered via a traditional investigative approach and one that is learning through a human factors lens. And a big reason for that is there's a very big difference in how the problem is defined. So if the problem in this case was defined, the root cause was seen as failure to follow work instructions, Billy used the wrong coolant, then likely the solution set for that is there in the traditional column, perhaps some employee discipline, maybe some retraining or a stand down. However, if the problem was defined, we're looking at the human error as a result of the system rather than the cause of the event, then that helps us uncover opportunities like color coding the drums or simplifying the process, as we did in this example, and ultimately help reduce the chance of that error occurring. So we want to remember that human error is a result rather than a cause. The worker is not the problem to be solved. The worker is the problem solver. And who better in this example than Billy to identify the weaknesses in the system and help improvement across the board. And with that, we will move over to Nicole to give us some top tips on training programs.
All right, thank you, Bethany. Great job, team. All right, so I'm Nicole Carlin. I'm with Collins Aerospace. I've been with this Human Factors SMIG group here for coming up on a year. So one of the newer members here for the team. But I'm going to be talking about some top tips for training creation, training program creation. All right, so we have this broken down into 3 sections: preparing your training, presenting, and then post-training. So you need your human factor. It's a requirement, right? We all need it. So you need to set your content. Hakan had some great examples of some content topics and how you break down the content for your group that's going through the training, right? Whether it was your engineers going through the training or your management, you might have some different content topics, and your examples might be a little bit different for those persons. And then also making it clear, simple, right? A lot of this is going to be coming from those discussions that Dan said, those open discussions and the communication within the training. Use engaging examples and make it personal, right? That's what we get out of this training here, right? Those personal stories, those, the human factors is all about humans. We're humans being human, right? It's not the humans being the fault, it's the process. So keeping it personal is really at the heart of the human factors training programs. Okay. And then presenting the training, it's training day. It never goes according to plan. You always need to roll with it, right? So what can we do for that? Those examples, again, are key. The breakdown discussions. I really like Hakan's example with the Legos or the Duplo boxes, right? That's a great engaging example, especially if you have in-person training. In-person training is always better than online if possible, right? And that way you can work together, and it really brings the training back to the office or back to your job, when you can go back and have those memories of those hands-on experiences. So that is really great. Also, the videos are always fantastic to add into the training. You can have the high level, the big impact. There was a plane crash, it was a maintenance issue. Those videos are always great for the big wow impact. But then these personal examples have always bring it, to the more personal. And so those lessons stick with you after the training. Okay, next. And then it's over. Your training is over. Great. You always, ask for feedback during the training, obviously. But then how do you continue to make it better, right? Go to sessions like this, obviously, right? That's why we're here. But then also, you're going to start collecting human factor data, right? So after you start collecting your human factor, you go through that and say, okay, we're doing better in some of these human factors areas, but we're still having issues in these certain areas. Maybe it's communication or awareness. And so then you can refocus your training to cover more examples, more topics, more content on those areas as you go through and evolve your human factors training program. All right, so 3 quick, easy, simple slides here, basically just to use as a checklist as you go through your human factors training program development and maintenance. So super quick, super simple. And with that, we'll go back to Craig and we'll move to the question and answer, which is the big meat of this, where we get some good feedback.
Chris, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
So that was my one of 3 errors that I am going to make this hour. Seeing as it's almost the end of the hour, it should be good for the next hour. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, everyone that's presented. Hopefully you found some really good, fantastic insights in there. I've definitely, in helping create this content, I've definitely taken some stuff away. It's been really good. Final thing I'll say before we get onto the questions and answers, please, I've got a QR code on the screen that just goes back to a feedback form. this isn't to kind of boost our ratings, give us feedback on how fantastic we are. This is about getting feedback on where you are in the journey, what you're struggling with, what content material you'd like to see come from the subject matter interest group. So please, couple of minutes. If you click on take that survey, it will help us help the rest of the industry going forward and help you.